Okay, we're out here at the range again today. We're going to be shooting at a 25-yard target down here as soon as I set it up, and decided I wanted to mount some offset open sights on the gun, my M&P 10, so that I can do up close combat type shooting with it. I've got the scope pretty much dialed in for ranges from 50 yards out to 200 meters, which is about 17 yards past 200 yards. So today's objective is figuring out how to mount the front and rear offset sights. You'll notice I've already mounted my front sight on here, which I may have mounted backwards, but I don't really care. The main thing is we got the post there. Now I'm going to post some pictures here of the different parts you need and a source for the parts, which I found was reasonable, and then a few notes, and we'll probably post the process it takes to sight this in. Now the rear sight, I left a few notches on my Picatinny rail here when I mounted my scope, so that I would still be able to mount a rear sight on this someday, and now it's finally come around to the time when I finally decided to buy the sight. I really like these sights. I found out that I'm having a little bit of clearance issues here between where the sight mounts and my rear eye objective on my scope. So what I'm going to do is end up mounting this puppy right back here, and I had to file off a little bit or grind off a little bit of this attachment bolt here, which attaches the sight to the base. So now that I filed that off, hopefully it won't be rubbing against my scope or vibrating against it when it shoots, or putting any extra pressure on the scope. Might have been a good idea to paint it, but I don't really give a rip about that. I don't think it's going to rust anyway. If it does, I'll take it back off and go through the motions again. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go to the pictures I was telling you about as far as parts and issues that I put some notes on already, and then we'll go back to sighting this puppy in. One more thing, these are the tools I'm using. I'm showing in the pictures the proper size hex wrench, but you will probably have to provide that unless you come up with a different offset base that happens to come with them. I also noted in the pictures that the hex bolt is not necessarily the one that's advertised. You will also need a flathead screwdriver. I'm using my Leatherman here. So between the screwdriver, maybe the needle nose, and wrench, you should be good to go. Although you may have the same problem I do and need to worry about clearance issues. Now, when I ordered this, I took my best guess on parts, and I just happened to luck out. And with a little extra work on my part, I was able to come up with a combo that works. So with this particular rifle, this particular scope base, my eye relief and setup, this is the combination that works for me. We'll hopefully be able to get it on target here in a bit. Okay, so here it is mounted. I'm going to try and show you. Yeah, now that I've ground the bolt off in there, you can see there's ever so slightly enough clearance there. The adjustment knob is pretty close to the scope here, but it still has enough room between the adjustment knob and the scope to be able to adjust my windage up and down. And you can see, nice thing about this too is I've got a pretty good distance between the front and the rear sight just by mounting the front sight here as far forward on the mounting base as I could to get my absolute maximum amount of distance. So that's cool. Now I'm going to come around here and tighten this baby down now that it's mounted on here. And once I get that tightened down, we'll see what we can do about setting up targets and getting ready to go here. Also, we're below freezing out here today. As you can see, it's recently snowed a little bit. And hopefully the battery in this camera won't die on me. I've had problems out here on cold days where the battery only lasts so long I have to throw it in my pocket and warm it back up to get some juice out of it. So anyway, sorry about all the amateur photography and the amateur comments, but that's the way it goes here on YouTube. Okay, so I set my targets up down here. What I decided to do is I set up a bullseye on the right. I set up one of my standard paper plates, and thanks to the sun being in the right direction, I was able to make an image of my body on some plain butcher paper here. You will notice the paper plate is about a 9-inch diameter plate, and a human head such as mine with a hat on it is a little bit wider than that. So the kill zone on my paper plates is pretty much between those two perpendicular lines where the eyes and nose and stuff are. And the wound area would be the entire width of the base of the paper plate. Anyway, I may use my scope on this bullseye target just to see where my scope is at 25 yards. Then I'll probably start dialing in my shots with the open sights on the butcher paper, and if I think I'm getting good enough, I might try to see if I can hit a 9-inch diameter paper plate there. I also set up some targets downrange here at 50 yards. Same idea, pretty much a full-size male outline and the 9-inch diameter paper plate. Now again, gunfire on this camera is muted, so it won't sound like real gunfire. Luckily there's not a whole lot of guys out here shooting because it's such a goddamn cold day, so we're good from that point of view. So away we go. Let's see how we do. Okay, so I pretty much tried to shoot that first round up at the head area, and it hit low, a little bit to the left. I did my next shots at about the same height as the first bullet hole, trying to hold more in the middle of the chest, and again they went low and left. So now I'm going to have to adjust the sights a little bit for windage, but mostly to bring the bullet up a little, I believe. So I'm going to do that next here. Okay, so rule of thumb is if your rear sight is adjustable up and down, then You would normally raise the rear sight to bring your bullet back up. But in the case of this particular combination, it's my front sight that's adjustable. So I lowered the front sight, which puts it lower in relation to the rear sight, which is now higher in relation to the front sight, which raises the barrel in the same process. So we'll see if that theory holds water, and we'll try that on a couple more shots here. Okay, what I did on that one is I put the upper right and upper left front sight, the top of those, pretty much even with the eyeballs on the paper plate over there, and the bullet hit just a little bit below that on the left. So it did come up a little. I only turned the front sight 180 degrees, so a half of a turn. I'm going to try another half a turn, and then I'm going to center the front sight even with the nose and eyes of the paper plate off to the right there, which will put it pretty much where the little ears on the headshot there is on the butcher paper, and we'll see where the bullet lands on the next shot. I'm expecting to hit left of center, but at least pretty close to where I'm aiming. Okay, pretty much what I expected, maybe a little bit low, so I'm going to raise it up 1/2 turn more. And basically I've made one full turn on the front sight, lowering it by one full turn, which is clockwise. I'm going to do 1/2 a turn further, so that's going to be 1.5 turns clockwise. And I'm going to have to take one more verification shot, then we'll worry about windage. Okay, so another half a turn. I think it brought him up just a little bit, and I did a 3-shot group, and I'm pretty happy with that. I'm actually surprised how close that, even though we're only really shooting 25 yards here, I'm pretty surprised how close that group was, considering what kind of a shot I am, and first time in my entire life that I've used open sights on a rifle. And the peephole on the rear sight and the horseshoe or bracket on the front sight are all new to me. It's kind of just a judgment call whether or not you got your top of your front sight post dead center in your peephole. But anyway, now I'm just going to have to figure out windage on this puppy and see if I can bring it over to the middle, and then I'm going to try the paper plate. So one step at a time. Let's all go in baby steps here. Okay, so I turned the adjustment knob. I wanted to move the rear sights to the right to bring the bullet to the right. If the bullet hits left, move the rear sight right, which is the proper procedure. So I dialed the adjustment knob on the rear sight to the right about 3 or 4 clicks to see where it moved on the alignment marks on the rear sight, and it looked like it was actually moving it to the left. So I brought it back 4 clicks and then went a couple extra the other way. And I took 2 shots. One shot ended up in the old group, and one shot did end up a little higher and to the right, after I aimed high up into the top of the head on the target. So I'm going to click it a couple more to the left on the dial knob, which is moving the rear sight to the right on the gun. But that's because I think I've mounted my rear sight backwards. I think these sights are designed to be mounted the other way. So it's a learning experience. I think I've got my front sight mounted the way it's intended to be mounted, but now I've mounted my rear sight backwards, which makes the adjustment knob backwards, if that makes any sense. And I did that because of the clearance issues on the scope, and I wanted the flip up to work in a certain direction when I flipped it up and down on the back sight. So as we learn as we're going here, we're trying to figure out tricks of the trade, how mounting things on the rifle actually work out in real life, etc. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more clicks left on the adjustment knob, but trying to move it right in reality. Okay, I patched those holes and drew myself a little bit of a face, give myself a little bit something to shoot at. I'll try to shoot my best shot here, aiming, trying to cover the nose with the top of my sight and pretty much bracketing the head on left and right, just see where I hit. I think it's still hitting a little to the left, but I've adjusted the rear sight so much it seems like it would have brought it into alignment by now. So I'm just going to leave the sights alone and see what happens, because there's a lot of human error involved here also. Still low, still a little to the left. Rapid fire, kind of fun to do there. So time to pause and readjust up and right, I guess. Well, I just found out some valuable lesson here. The adjustment key, which you can take a look at in one of the pictures I had for you. I forgot, I didn't seat it all the way down on the front post. I thought I had it seated, but I had it raised up a little. And I started turning, and it's like it's not turning for me. I'm wondering, like, what's going on? Well, I was turning the front post itself. I was twisting the metal instead of dialing the front post down. Anyway, I'm surprised I was able to actually do that. So I had to dial the metal back. It's a kind of a square front post. I had to dial it back and straighten it out, hoping I didn't break it off. And luckily it didn't break off, so at least the metal's soft enough you can mess with it. And then I seated the key down and was able to dial it another half a turn. There's quite a bit of adjustment left to go, so I can dial it down some more if I have to. But be careful when you're adjusting that front post. You might end up having to buy a whole new front sight before it's over with. Anyway, I'm going to take another 3-shot group here, and I still haven't adjusted my rear sight, so I've got to adjust the rear sight, and then I'll take another 3-shot group and see what happens. Well, that's interesting. Basically, I'm learning this sight with the separation I've got on the gun and everything, and the distance down to the target. My bracket, or my horseshoe I was talking about, is positioned right at the top of the head. A little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, even with the top. My post is right between the eyes, and as best as I can, keep it centered in my rear sight peephole. And then I squeezed off 3 fairly rapid rounds, less than a second between shots, and that's what I got. 1 between the eyes, a couple lower left. So I'm going to go ahead and dial the rear sight One more click left, and that's it. I'm going to leave it there. I don't think I'm going to get a much better dial in until I try shooting longer range here and find out if that has anything to do with it. Okay, I found out I only had one shot left, and what I was trying to do there is I changed my mind. I adjusted the rear sight and everything, and then I did a center mass heart shot, and I hit him in the heart. Dead center, right there. So, I think I'm pretty much dialed in. I'm going to go down and patch holes and put another mag of ammo in and see where we go from here. Okay, what I'm going to try this time is 3 taps to the chest, 3 taps to the head, and then 3 taps to the paper plate, and just see how good I do with these open sights. And then I'm going to shoot 3 taps to the bullseye over to the right with the scope. And here we go. So, pretty much got some good shots there. One little low left, but not bad. I wasn't too confident in these 3 shots, but I'm not even sure why. It looks like there's 4 holes. One of the shots must have ripped out the hole of a prior shot. That doesn't look too good over there on the paper plate, though, does it? I only got maybe 1 decent shot out of the 3. So much for trying to get a bad guy that's got a hostage. And then I went to the scope, but I was having a hard time getting the scope lined up. But apparently I got a couple of decent shots on the scope, and maybe one that I pulled a little bit on. So I guess we're ready to move down to a longer range now. Okay, so I set some targets up down here at 50 yards, and I had to darken the outline of my guy a little bit, and then put the paper plate there for the heart shot area, because I couldn't even see the lines in the open sights at this range. Right now it looks like I can see the head pretty good, and I can see the paper plate for the heart shot pretty good. And you can see there's a couple thumbtacks right and left holding that paper plate in the middle of the guy's chest. So I'm going to take a few shots here with the open sights, just see if I can even hit the image or not at this range. I'm not expecting to do very good here at 50 yards, but be kind of nice to be able to get 1 for 3 in the heart, 1 for 3 in the head. We'll see what happens. Oh, and by the way, the prior shooting, most of what I did there, I just used a sandbag on the fore end of the gun and tilted the gun 45 degrees to the left so I could see the open sights, and did most of my shots that way, except for the few shots that I did with the scope where I held the rifle perpendicular like you normally would. But it was all just using a sandbag under the fore end and a sandbag under the rear stock to, you know, get the sights as close to as accurate as I could. Now this time I'm trying to take advantage of my bipod on the front there. I'm gonna, even though I'm gonna be using the open sights and tilting the gun 45 to the left, I'm going to use the left bipod leg as my front support. So I'm gonna have a little bit of a crutch there, but mostly stock on the shoulder, hand on the trigger, and leaning the gun over onto one leg of the bipod as the front support, just to see if I can hit anything here at 50 yards. Okay, fire in a hole. That one, so I probably missed altogether. Over the head. Interesting. So my elevation's not too bad, but I'm shooting to the left again. So I'm going to have to dial the sight to the right, I guess. Well, move the rear sight aperture to the right, but dialing the sight control to the left, and see how that works. Okay, so I moved the sight a little to the right again. I'm going to have to come back to the shorter range to see if it's throwing me off a lot. Of course, it'll move quite a bit more at the longer range than the shorter range, so it shouldn't affect the short range near as much as the long range, but that all remains to be seen. So plodding ahead with the dial-in process here. Okay, fire in the hole, shooting at the heart. Okay, so moved a bit higher and to the right. Tried a little bit better to aim while I was at it, and still hitting left. So I guess it's time to dial a little more left into it, or a little more right into the sight, and go to the next mag full. Okay, this time I'm just going to shoot at the heart paper plate, and then maybe try 3 shots at the upper right face with the scope. So 3 shots open sights, 3 shots with the scope. Okay, so I'm just barely able to even hit the heart shot with the open sights. The scope, I actually shot a little faster rounds there, and I was able to get 3 kill shots. Well, 2 kill shots and maybe a right in the cheekbone shot. And that's without even really trying too hard to aim. Obviously, once you get out to this range, 50 yards on out, better off to use a scope than open sights. And that's pretty much what I figured was going to be the result. Now I'm going to come back and shoot a few rounds up close at the 25-yard target again, just to see if I really want to fiddle around anymore, trying to get the bullets to move right. Okay, this is back to 25 yards, and I'll just throw a magazine in, use my bipod to my best of my ability, sometimes using it on the one leg, sometimes using it on the two leg, depending on whether I'm shooting the scope or the open sights. I'm going to shoot the open sights at the head. I'm going to shoot 3 at the head with open sights, 3 at the chest with open sights, and then I'll go back to the scope and shoot the last 3 to the head with the scope. So that'll be 9 shots total if everything goes per plan. Well, it's 2 o'clock and the day's warmed up a little bit above freezing, so that's good. I'm going to try 6 more rounds here. I think I got about that many left in the in this clip, in this magazine. So again, I'm going to do 3 head shots with the scope and try to do 3 center mass with the open sights. And by the way, I was only standing on those. I wasn't using any bipod or anything. I guess I must have winged him in the ear, which I felt like I pulled, and lo and behold, I think I did. Yeah, that was just a miss. Then the next 2 shots standing with the scope. I'm not a great shot standing up, but managed to get a couple of good hits there. And looks like I had a little problems on one of my shots to the body, but I got a couple right in the heart where I wanted them, so that's good. So I'm thinking, you scope or open sights, 25 to 50 yards. 50 yards, a little iffy. 25, 10. Up close and personal, on out to 25, probably 30, 35 yards. Amateur shooter like I am, probably have it dialed in pretty good. Just a matter of not getting rushed and not flinching. I was watching a video the other day about the human brain and the way it flinches on shots and how that transfers over to shooting a handgun, and it applies with a rifle as well, obviously. But that'll be my next video, to discuss how to correct the flinch. I find that myself, I flinch on my first shot, and then I settle down and do okay on my follow-up shots. But I'm going to have to train my brain to stop doing the lousy first shots. Anyway, I think I'll just empty my magazine here and clean my rifle and go home and call it good.